Hello, hello. It's been a while since I came on live, and I'm going to be speaking with Ayesha today. Ayesha is a queer affirmative therapist, is trauma informed, is a researcher, and is really passionate about having more conversations around the intersections of PCOS and mental health. So I'm just going to quickly bring her on live and we can get started. Give me a moment. There you go. So yeah, as someone who lives with PCOS, I'm really excited for this conversation. Hi.
Hello.
How? Oh gosh, embarrassing, cringe. How are
No, it's
you?
a fan moment. How are you?
Oh, nonsense.
I'm so happy to
Well,
be here. And thank you so much for doing this with me. I think
no
I'm just
problem.
happy to talk about PCOS all the time. And
Oh
especially
gosh.
because we have something that that might be helpful for persons with PCOS. And I think this is the kind of conversation that has not been had um, in narratives around PCOS. It's always been medical, and it's always been what about your diet and how do you lose weight and how do you take care and how do you manage the symptoms. But we really want to talk about what impact does it have on your life. um,
Oh, absolutely. And I think so important, Aisha, to discuss mental health and PCOS, right? Because I was just sharing with our audience as to how I live with PCOS. And for the longest time, I never really understood that there was a mental health angle to it. I sort of felt like, oh, if I were to get some exercise in, not eat, as many junk food, as much junk food, and lose some weight, then it would mean that my symptoms would automatically improve. But that wasn't really the case. And I think
yeah.
which is why it's also important to build that awareness around the kind of symptoms that do exist with mental health symptoms that do exist with PCOS. So
Yeah.
yeah, my first question to you is, how are PCOS and mental health connected in the first place? I mean, of course, we may understand that in terms of, let's say, how it impacts one's body image, or we may also understand, like, just in general, living with a chronic condition is challenging. But beyond that, is there sort of any connection?
I think thank you for sharing also that you have experience of PCOS and you live with PCOS. And I think when you said that, right, that for the longest time, all of us, including me, I also live with PCOS, have thought that we just need to get in some exercise and we just need to fix our body and we need to do certain things. And I think if we just trace that voice back, we can see that it comes from a doctor, a medical professional who very likely did not go into the details of PCOS when at least I got the diagnosis, and I know so many others. And the only one size fits all kind of remedy was to lose weight, right? And I made a meme on it on our page over at Dialogue, which is that it is the symptom that you find it difficult to lose weight, and that's the thing that you're asking us to do, right? And I mean, just the ridiculousness of certain ways in which I have now come to see the medical systems as having a very patriarchal kind of lens when looking at women's experiences. And not to say that that just in terms of how pain is experienced, in terms of how pain is studied, in terms of how very little is spoken about the lived part of this. It isn't the same as, and I would say this for any medical experience, that it's not just biology. It's the everyday that you experience it. And I think with PCOS, there is very little that goes untouched by that experience, whether it's your everyday, grooming, whether it's your relationship with your body, which is such a big rupture in which you think there's something wrong with your body, in which you think you need to constantly be working on it to fix it. There's a lot of hate that's sometimes directed towards the body for not being able to do certain things, for not being, healthy and typical. Um, Relationships, in the ways in which um, when we exist relationally, we are also so conscious of the way that we're perceived. And a large part of the experience of PCOS, as many, many people have shared, has been that of undergoing a massive transformation with regards to their appearance, which to a lot of people can feel very personal. You know, it's the way that you look at yourself and you learn to identify yourself with a certain type of uh, you know appearance, and then when that changes and there's very little you can do about it, the kind of frustration that you're left with, you know. So I think when you ask me the question about how PCOS interacts with mental health, um, not only does research suggest that persons with PCOS experience more depression and anxiety, are more likely to experience depression and anxiety than others, but also, that one part of it is the hormonal aspect of it, but the other part is the
Right.
lived experience of it, which
Right.
has a societal lens, which has the lens of what I may or may not be able to do. If I'm a person who wants to have a child, and I'm usually the first thing you hear about PCOS is, oh, you may not be able to, conceive, you will
That's right.
require
Yeah.
medical help. And what that
Yeah.
does to somebody who identifies themselves as a person who would like to have a child can have very, very profound impacts on the way that they view themselves, their roles, their space in society sometimes, because society is such a big part of how we place ourselves. So there are so many layers um, to this experience, and I feel like all of them have gone, uh, for the longest time undetected, unspoken about.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and when that happens, people are really left isolated, you know.
Yeah.
We're left thinking that this is something very personal and I have to deal with it on my own, and maybe I'm weird for having this, and I didn't take enough care and I didn't do enough things, which in itself is a harsh space. But also to think
Yeah.
about the ways in which um, we're constantly living with um, a difficult relationship with the body, the place that you inhabit, you
Absolutely.
know.
Yeah.
So that's a couple of things that, when you asked me about mental health came to mind for me, because
Yeah.
it's such a multifaceted experience that it's difficult for me to even answer this question. What part of your life goes untouched by something that's so pervasive, right? For people who have
Absolutely.
uh, loss of hair or acne or hirsutism, or who experience changes in their libido, or who you know all the multiple ways, and you're more at risk of developing diabetes. There's actual health bodily concerns that you have to now tend to take more care about, changing diets,
Yeah.
exercises, vegan, gluten free, and
Yeah.
it's almost you have to alter your whole life, and I don't think we've spoken enough about that change,
Right.
which
Right.
is so massive.
No, for sure. And I think the fact that it's called a lifestyle disorder, and the solution that's also presented to folks is often like a change in one's lifestyle, right? Even like, let's say, even making the choice about going on, let's say, hormonal birth control.
Yeah.
That can be so challenging for people, like whether you look at it from, let's say, the socio-cultural context, the stigma that exists to this date against birth control, right? And just because like it's accessible to, let's say, one part of the society doesn't mean that PCOS care in general, uh, especially inclusive and affirming care, is available for folks.
Yeah.
In that vein, I wanted to ask you, Aisha, as to, you've spoken so eloquently about, the current state of healthcare. You've also like touched upon body image briefly, just the nature of like diagnosis and care. How does that impact one's mental health, right? That entire journey of having to go through that.
Yeah, and I think I was more in touch with it when I was trying to put together a myth busting, poll on my Instagram. And it just struck me that so many of us don't know, and there is no specific symptom that we look at and say, okay, there is PCOS. It's very difficult to also sometimes identify, folks with PCOS because the doctors will kind of suspect multiple things. Sometimes there are cysts, sometimes there are no cysts on the ovaries. Sometimes you have symptoms, sometimes you don't have symptoms. But I think just the frustration of not knowing sometimes to begin with in that
Yeah,
process. And even if you
yeah.
do know, the very limited information that you're furnished with, right? That your doctor usually will not sit you down and explain the many, many ways in which your life is probably already impacted and will be. Um, and I think just not having um, that hand holding can feel quite distressing to many. And that's come up in many of our discussions, that uh, doctors have also been, body shaming. They've not been affirmative. They've not been sensitive, considerate in the ways that, this sensitive information is also shared with the person who's experiencing this. And I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
the start to that experience being this way, you inherently learn to kind of associate, there being something wrong with you and your body and something you may have done or not done. Of course, there's stress, right? Of all that you anticipate will change, or all that you anticipate has been, up with your body will continue. Also, that it's not curable. It's not like you
Yeah,
can do certain things and it'll go away. It's a
yeah,
constant kind of up and down where people say,
yeah,
and then I lost weight and I gained weight again. And I
yeah,
had regular periods and I didn't have regular periods again. And I
yeah.
and I went and did all these holistic alternative things and I did all the medical things and because it's just a chronic condition. And I think it being chronic is also not focused on enough. It's
Correct.
a lifelong thing until you're out of
Yeah.
your childbearing years, um, and you have to learn to manage and deal with that, almost feeling like I'm the only person going through this or alone. So mm, when there is the possibility of connecting with other folks with PCOS, it can be a very, very different experience just in knowing that there is a dedicated space to talk about all that are micro ways in which this impacts your life, that you're not alone, that there are other people going through the same stuff, and you can cry about it or laugh about it or talk about it.
Yeah. No, that's beautifully said. I think it's as you were speaking, I was also thinking about how like beyond like those reproductive years, right, where we're at our reproductive fertile peak. I've not really heard of
Mm,
like younger people with PCOS or like older people with PCOS. If it is a condition that's sort of going to exist for the rest of our lives, much like PMS, right? Like, so it's just a constellation of symptoms that one experiences. Of course, like one can manage it to a very large extent, but you also hear of these cures like reverse your symptoms or like cure it naturally at home, and one also like tries all those things, and I will admit to having tried all those things myself as well, right? So accessing the right kind of care and also like allowing a little bit of like maybe figuring what works for me, whether I mean maybe like teas don't actually work, but like if drinking tea is giving me that kind of sort of like just joy of like having addressed my situation, I think
mm,
that is sort of enough and that is sort of valid. And like where is the space to also have a conversation around that, right? Why does it always have to be so result oriented?
yeah.
In order, as long as I'm not causing like active harm to my body. I also just wanted to quickly pick up a question where someone asks, are you guys professionals trained on all these topics, or out of hobby you say all these points? So Ayesha here is a therapist who is currently curating a wonderful support group for persons with PCOS, sort of to hold space for folks with lived experiences of PCOS to come together, share resources, vent, like she said, or just like find solidarity with each other. I think
Yeah.
that is super important. And the other thing is, like, as people who, like, both of us live with PCOS, which also means that we've been through like years and years of experimentation, because that's sort of like how it is a little bit. And also, like, having consulted with multiple medical professionals who are like friends or like people, you know, we've accessed in a professional capacity. Yeah, that's sort of where it comes from, if that answers your question. But we're
Yeah.
not saying that we offer you a diagnosis of PCOS. PCOS is typically diagnosed through something called the Rotterdam criteria. You should meet with a gynecologist to sort of understand that better. But basically, if you have raised androgens, which may look like excessive hair on your body, it may look like, or it may look like hair thinning and baldness, or hirsutism, which is essentially like acne, or it could be like polycysts showing up in the ultrasound. So if you have, and also of course, if you have you know, missed periods or like absence of periods, like if you have
Hmm.
any two of these three symptoms, typically that's how
Yeah.
your gynac would diagnose it. So yeah, go check with the gynecologist if you think that you might have some of these symptoms.
I think also just to add, that we're talking about our lived experiences and we're talking about how those experiences touch into those aspects that are less spoken about. So it's definitely not about the medical professional aspect of it, but that after somebody has experience of these symptoms, what that experience may look like. Um, and I think, yeah, so when we're talking about the group also, right? Um, just to say that it's more than just a support group. So I'm calling it group therapy for persons with PCOS because it will no doubt be a supportive group, right? But it is also um, a space where we're hoping that when we bring all of ourselves, uh, you know, the whole range of your experience as a person with PCOS, that you can't then distinguish between what is PCOS related and what isn't, right? If there's some aspect of your life that is impacted by that experience, whether it's relationships, whether it is, you know, workplace, whether it's body image, self-esteem, and these are just such generic sounding labels for things, but the lived experience is so rich that we're really holding space for a long-term group that will help persons with PCOS to connect in a way that's more than just PCOS also. So it's really I'm inviting people who would like to bring their whole experiences or their whole self and all their experiences to uh, to explore how this has impacted them. And a lot of times when we think through our experiences and think, how has this impacted me? Is when we're actually able to integrate that as part of our lives. Otherwise, there's
Yeah,
always an othering of even that aspect of our living, right?
yeah.
And I think thank you for also bringing up the support group aspect because I think there's such a distinction between support groups and group therapy, and a lot of people are pro therapy and that's usually individual therapy. You know, in India, for the longest time, group therapy has been associated with being uh, oriented towards your community. Your family would take over that role, and your, for example, school or peers. But group therapy is actually quite different. And if I can, I would like to take a couple of minutes to talk about how it's different
Yes.
because there's such a misnomer around that, about it being, a space where it's either we're only thought of as a support group where we're collecting people with the same experience, or it's thought of as, you know, informal, not important, you know.
Right.
But group therapy is where we have people that we don't know, who are not part of our daily lives, um, who are not people that we would necessarily be conscious of being ourselves in front of. Because we don't know them. They're not part of our lives. They don't have a history on us. Which, for example, and I'm making this kind of distinction only because people do compare it to friends or they compare it to family, is that
Right.
you have that kind of equation before. You see
Right.
them outside, but to have a group of people that you don't know, and they're both witness to your journeys, and they're contributing to it, especially in long-term groups, you become so aware of your interpersonal dynamics. Oh, I do this, I relate to people in this way, not just here but also outside. And because it's a therapeutic space, right, that there's a therapist who's able to talk about and bring that to your notice and attention. So it's a magical, and a lot of times I describe groups as being very powerful, because you don't know what will come up for you. You have an association or you share one part of your experience, and I have immediately an association in my own mind, just as we're doing right now, but it's just you and me. And if we have 8 other people, right, what that might look like is so rich, where we might reach through each other, with each other, is so rich, especially with PCOS. So
Right.
I'm very excited about the possibility of this group, and I think just having this space to deconstruct all the various ways in which, um, we think of our lives and our experiences is holds a lot of potential. I think for connection, for belonging, for maybe change. I don't know, but anything that might come up, and it's really, I can't say what might come up because it's so rich. It's like bouncing off each other.
Yeah. No, and I mean, Aisha, it would also be just helpful to maybe touch upon the ethics of a space like this a little bit, right? Like what
Mm,
kind of accountability measures exist. Of course, it's a
mm,
space for like co-learning and growing together. Like how does one ensure that if they're coming to a space like this, especially in the long run, like friendships will be forged, right? And like, I mean,
mm.
obviously that kind of sort of resonance and validation that one receives from spaces like this is also very high.
Yeah.
So what is your role in a space like this, and how do you ensure that it remains a safer space in that sense?
So with any therapeutic space, it's confidential, and we're very particular about boundaries, just so everybody um, is protected and can have enough um, confidentiality in that space, right? So that includes, usually group therapy is long term, and which means that there will be very deep connections, but they are most valuable because they are limited to that space and that time. So whatever that weekly space and time is, and we want to keep it to that, just as you do with your therapist, because in this case we're doing much the group is its members, that all
That's
members are
interesting.
therapists.
Sorry, I lost you for a second. Sorry, I lost you for a second
Ah,
there. The last I heard was in this case we.
in this case, the group members themselves are also acting as therapists because with each other's sharings, we're reaching somewhere, right? So we want to keep the space as boundaried as possible to that time and space, and the connections to that time and space, so that um, you know we're maintaining confidentiality, we're ensuring everybody's safe, and there's enough for all of us to kind of feel okay about sharing so much. These are often very deep and personal sharings. And me as a group facilitator, I'm going to hold space. But it is not like in groups, it's difficult to take on, and usually we don't take on the role of an expert because every person is an expert of their own experiences. The only thing we can do is facilitate the space to be able to reach or make deeper meaning, richer connections and associations that help us to get somewhere with our own experiences. So I think that's all I can say for now. But if anybody is interested, while we're considering forming this group, that I'm. Oh, did I lose you? Okay, yeah, yeah. As we're
Yeah,
considering
you're back. You're back. Yeah.
forming this group, um, that I'm offering, an intake session just to see if the person is a good fit for the group and if the group is a good fit for the person, right? Because it's not just a sign up. It's more of a process of seeing whether this group works for me, whether, I'm able to get what I need and receive what I need from this space, if not from an individual space. But this is dedicatedly for persons with experience of PCOS.
That's amazing, Aisha. Thank you so much
I think
for
I lost
you
you.
basically answered my next question. Sorry, lost you. Are you back? Hello.
Oh no. Yeah. Yeah.
I can sort of hear
Yes.
you.
Oh, oh no.
Okay, I think you might be back.
Better.
Um, no.
Is this any better?
In the sense that I can hear you now, so I suppose that's yeah. You're moving a little bit. Okay, great. Sorry, I sort of cut you because I thought you were done speaking, but I suppose I lost you. Please complete what you were saying.
No, I think I ended there where I think,
Okay, no. So essentially, I was sort of like, applauding the incredible work that you've been doing, and you're also hoping to, and I know you're going to do through this group. And also, how is it that one can sign up for this group? Like, where are the details? And you also mentioned that there would be an intake session to sort of understand the person's needs and whether they're a good fit for the group and whether the group is a good fit for them.
yeah.
So yeah, where are all these good juicy details about like what one can, how one can sign up?
There's a very beautiful flyer that I've put up on my feed, back on my page, but also in the link to sign up is in the bio. Oh,
Hmm. No,
okay.
you're back. You're back.
Okay.
Yes.
The link to sign up is in the bio. So just head over to Dialogue Mental Health, and the link in the bio the first link right there is to sign up. So anybody who's felt drawn to this group, to this space, to sharing their experiences of PCOS, unpacking them, understanding them, working through them, you're more than welcome to sign up, drop us an email, and we'll take it from there. So I think, thank you so much for doing this, Aparupa. And that I know that you shared some aspects of your own experience, which made it so much richer. But I really want to thank you for holding this conversation. I think about something that is usually neglected, and I'm really grateful for that.
No, not at all. Thank you for also sort of helping us understand the intersections of PCOS and mental health beyond just like the more diagnostic, the more clinical issues that one may go through, and how it is so all pervasive and impacts like our entire lives and lived experiences, and what their experience can be like. And for also sort of helping us reimagine what PCOS care then can actually look like. So
Yeah.
yeah, I hope that all folks who are interested are able to speak with you if nothing else, and feel validated, and feel like they matter, once they're in your space as well. So yeah, all the best, and very excited for the launch of this space.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.